I am Michael D. Campbell, and I am Chief Geologist of I2M Consulting here in Houston, Texas. I'm here today to tell you about a project we did many years ago, beginning in the 1970s, while I was a graduate student at Rice University. I proposed a comprehensive uranium and hydrogeological evaluation program to the U.S. ERDA, which is the Energy Resources Group that subsequently became DOE in Grand Junction. We proposed to do an example of the sampling program in Tucumcari and in Clovis here in Texas. Well, time passed, and come 1977, the DOE equivalent, ERDA group, announced that an exploration program based on new National Uranium Exploration Evaluation Program, otherwise known as NURI, will be released. They've started to do some sampling up in Alaska and elsewhere. And we happened to notice that in one of the releases in the Seward Peninsula, there were some interesting geochemical anomalies. And so we put together a program through a company we formed called United Resources International. That meant that we were going to go after some of the geochemical and uranium and rare earth anomalies that were shown in those NURI maps on the Seward Peninsula. We raised about $300,000 that would cover some sampling, analyses, some recon in Alaska, and some mapping and claim staking if necessary. Well, it turns out that we worked for a while in the early days, and just decided to start a program in 1977. That meant that we'd go take a look, a few of us, and go on from there. Well, subsequently, long story short, we made trips for 1977 and 1978 field programs. And we did a report in 1979. About the time that report was introduced and we finished, in the hopes of raising additional money for drilling and geophysics, 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant incident occurred, and that brought uranium exploration to a halt. The uranium prices fell, nuclear power plant permitting ceased, and the nuclear uranium exploration industry went to sleep for about 10, maybe 12 years. I'm going to tell you what we found in that program, and at the same time, the people that were involved in that were some of my fellow graduate students at Rice University, including Kevin Biddle and Charles Wilczowski, primarily, and Chuck Weisenberg was also involved. He did a lot of the microscopy that we did in those days. But what we found was some pretty interesting high-grade uranium, and we subsequently put that into a major report, and it went to bed, forgotten about for a number of years. And then we decided that as the uranium industry was beginning to come back, we'd take another look at that, and we decided to put together that report and integrate it into a paper, which we did subsequently. And this presentation is essentially based on it, plus in addition to other work we've done on microscopy and sampling to form the basis for this program, for this particular presentation. So let me move on to the next slide, and we'll get into some of the details. Okay, as you can see in the upper right here, I'll get, if you can see my pointer, that is, you'll see about where we're looking at it. Right here is Nome. Right here is Gullivan, a small town that has a good airstrip for supplies and reasonably large airplanes. And right here where this green dot is, you can see that's where we focused a lot of our attention on and found a lot of the high-grade uranium. Okay, a different shot is, you can see this peninsula is where Gullivan is. Here's a better picture of where the high-grade uranium is. And up here is a spot where the Houston Oil and Minerals made a discovery, followed up by Tri-X, that finally became known through the work of Dickinson, who announced it in this area right south in the southern part of Death Valley. We'll learn more about that in a little bit. Right here is, down here in the lower part, I should say, is an interesting area where if you look at the overall structure, the basin, this McCarthy Marsh is usually called, but it's essentially a basin. It's got 16,000 feet of fluvial sediment, plaudal and fluvial sediments, and reported lignite. As over here in the Houston Oil and Minerals and Tri-X discovery, that was a fault blocked area of fluvial sediments with lignite that were showing very high grade uranium in that. So that's part of the reason we decided to do this paper, is to raise the issue whether or not the McCarthy Basin is in fact a new uranium roll-front district. To give you an idea, you can see some of the, here's McCarthy Basin over here in a different format with the igneous rocks showing up in the Darby Range. And down here is where we were, as you can see over on this aspect, on this part right here. And you see the McCarthy Basin right here. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, here is a field shot. The McCarthy Basin is off in the distance here. We're up in the helicopter looking down toward the, let's see, that would be toward the northwest. Here's a closer view. The basin itself is right here, not too distant, in the Bindaleva Mountains in the background, forming the circular arc that we suspect might be an impact crater. And we're on what's called the Kachuik intrusive right here. Here are the people involved. The stage one, the field reconnaissance. Chuck Weisenberg here with a bear gun. Here's my brother, Steve Campbell, who is was the field operations manager to get us around and supply us with food and everything. I took the picture, of course, and here's the helicopter pilot. That's for the first year. The second year, Steve is at it again, and you can see here Chuck Weisenberg. Here's Kevin Biddle, one of my associates. There's a helicopter pilot again. Chuck Weisenberg right here, and the claim staking people. They came in handy when we decided to lay in about 600 claims, if I remember correctly. Well, what did we find? What we found was interesting. In a dike rock, in among a monzonite, we found this black material, all blocky and everything. It turned out to be alunite. Alunite, and this sample, which is C2-1, this was some of the analyses that came out of it, and it runs about 0.22% uranium, about 0.38 lanthanum, greater than 1% a rare earth, cerium, and a number of other anomalous things we'll get into in a little bit. You'll notice like down here, the alunite in thin section is heavily fractured. It's got a reaction rim around it of what it turns out to be a cesium or a cerium reaction rim from perhaps hydrothermal activity. And you'll see the zircons and apatites and monazites scattered around here and there. And the white area is, of course, all feldspar. One of the interesting things is we had cathodoluminescence done at Rice back in the 70s. I found out that this is the alunite, but if you notice, there's lots of little inclusions in here, perhaps nucleation sites for uranium, thorium, and rare earth minerals. And this is intruding some of the feldspar and perhaps some hornblende there too. See a big old zircon crystal right here. Okay, here's what the rock looks in hand sample up here, as I indicated earlier. This was it right here, if you can see it, dike rock with alunite, and this is what the country rock looked like, monzonite, and that was running along a dike area across a southern, what we call the southern area of the area that we examined. Okay, let's go on to the next page. Here's a layout now. Let me back up a little bit. Everything we've done in this paper is actually, we've included a lot of links and other references for your later view. This presentation will no doubt end up on a YouTube, and that means we'll have access to a details area below the YouTube where we can add a PDF file that will make the links that we've included in this presentation available to you for follow-up. But let's get back here now to what we've got. If you notice, major components are greater than 1,000 ppm. There's quite a number of uranium and thorium and all the rare earths, including, if you notice here, terbium is unusually high. Terbium of the rare earth group is highly sought after and quite expensive these days, market price. Don't know how long that will last, but this makes this stand out because, as we'll see in a little bit, this is a terbium, gadolinium, and europium rich deposit. Rich meaning highly anomalous, and we'll see how far the economics go on it when and if we can ever take a closer look at this deposit. You see all these are something like 11 elements in that spread that are showing greater than 1,000 ppm. These are geochemical samples looking for telltale elements that would provide an insight into the geological conditions in the plutons. The phonolite is present, and it has some interesting characteristics to it too. Let's move on to the next slide here. Here's some of the thin section work we did, microscopy. You'll see on the left here, the darker brown is highly fractured, stress fractured, we think now. That raises the issue about whether this area was impacted and create major stress throughout all this igneous metamorphic rocks around the area, or whether this is just normal cooling stress fractures that appear normally in other things as well. The darker colored, brownish colored in thin section anyway, although they're black in hand sample, is the lanthanide rich. And then you'll see in the yellow rims, as if they're reaction rims around the alunite, the brown alunite. Those are cerium rich alunite. And of course, these areas of high relief is feldspars, and you'll see an occasional zircon. Here's that same view in cross nickels. Here's a zircon poking out here. And there's another view. You'll see hornblende showing up, and also augite. Excuse me. And okay, moving on down here to the lower left, you'll see the XRF view of alunite containing abundant calcium, as you might expect. That's the yellow. The sphene around the edges is titanium, and the feldspar is black. Another sample of interest, I think, to you might be this showing some similars, but you'll see the alunite with the cerium rim and the brown alunite. But you notice all the very small inclusions here, and that is supported by the cathodoluminescence that we saw earlier. And we think those are probably nucleation sites for various minerals, probably uranium or thorium or rare earth, different types of rare earth. Hornblende showing up in green down here. Now we've added, for those of you that get the PDF, this is a little link here, so you can see an enlarged view of this figure, and will be a large view. Let's move on to the next slide. Let's see what we're doing on the time. Okay, got 4 minutes left. Let's cover the granites and the other igneous rocks. You notice in this particular plot here, the C1, C17, C21C is the southern area, and it plots way out in ahead of the rest of the samples in the area. All these samples in here were from a USGS sediment and whole rock sampling survey. And you'll see some of our areas. We have what's called a northern area, and a southern area is where the heavy mineralization is, and a central area. And this is the blocks. The black blocks here are the ones that we sampled, and it shows that they're all enriched in uranium and in thorium. This layout here on the right here is figure 16A, is the alkali silica diagram for the alkaline rocks that we're looking at here. And you notice these particular highly mineralized samples are hanging together right in this alkaline basaltes, alkaline gabbro, alkali basalt family plot area, which is interesting. Okay. I think, yeah, that covers it pretty well. Let's move on to the next. Now, taking all this, putting all this together, why are we thinking about the two things? One, we're thinking of the actual mineralization I've just discussed, but in terms of perhaps being of economic importance, it's still early in the project to determine that. We need to do the drilling and additional mapping and sampling in that area where the highly mineralized rocks are. But the interesting thing, and probably the most important thing, is that whether these particular rocks that we've looked at and that are all enriched in uranium, whether or not they make an outstanding source rock for the basin that these rocks are right on the edge of this basin called the McCarthy Basin, or well, from a topographical matter, it's the marsh called the McCarthy Marsh, but below it's as I said earlier, 16,000 feet of sediment with lignite. All right, that struck us as a primary target, as being an outstanding roll front deposit basin. And when you put all the basic requirements together that have proved out in other parts of the world, you have a uranium source rock of Cretaceous age in proximity to a basin containing the 16,000 feet of fluvial sediments with lignite. And we also have an analogy present in the roll front occurrences in the fault block tertiary sediments of the South Death Valley area that I mentioned earlier, to the east of the McCarthy Basin. And we have the groundwater with elevated uranium and other elements in recharge, and that came from the NURI program, where they show that a lot of the samples they took at the surface were also enriched in uranium. So, in our opinion, this would make an outstanding area of basin for subsequent work. It's fairly close to support. The Gullivan site would be great. I'm sure the people there would be glad to see a major project come and help to support and perhaps even pay for a number of college educations for their people there and their children, and improve their lives financially and otherwise. And also, it would be interesting to think in terms of how big this could be. A district, when I call this a potential uranium district, this could be very large. This could be world class, and I would I hope that one day that will result in coming in with people to come in and have a look. Spend some money, spend some drilling time, spend some what have you to take a look at this. So the real question is, where in the basin is it? Well, you have to start at the edge of the basin, and you work into the basin with drilling. The lignites are probably going to be there right from almost from the very beginning on the edge. But what's really interesting, if you do drill at the very edge, if we get a possible core from the contact between the bottom part of the basin and the underlying country rock, underlying igneous and metamorphic rock, we might be able to tell from the silica involved whether that was actually an impact crater. So let's move on. But if time permits, and let me check the time here. I'm pretty close to being out, but let me make it real quick. The rare earths here are unusual. You can see here on this plot, this is a gadolinium, europium, terbium, dysprosium anomaly. This is very unusual. It's high, and over here on the normalized plot, this was concentration over here. The normalized plot, you see even the europium, gadolinium, terbium, and dysprosium anomaly holds up. So on that basis, it's extremely interesting and perhaps useful. Let's move on to the next. The interesting thing is these rare earths are widespread in this area. USGS did a fairly large-scale sampling program many years ago, and you can see the rare earths are quite common and usually high. Now, whether that's because of an impact or other aspects to the surrounding igneous and metamorphic rocks remains to be seen. But right here, if you can see my pointer, this is our mineralized zone right here. So you can see that you're looking at cerium up past 10,000, and as I said, terbiums, the heavy rare earths are also high. So this stands out rather nicely, and should have someone take a look at it sooner or later. So let's move on to the last as I start to wrap up. I can't leave without mentioning we also took an area north of Death Valley where there were some interesting rocks that we wanted to take a look at. We were able to take a fair look at some of this, and we came in with some major anomalies, both geochemistry-wise and magnetically in geophysical results that needs follow-up. Here's our field team, and by the way, this gentleman right here, Eric Nelson, he was our lead pole man in the geophysical program that we did. If you can tell, it was in October and it was already snowing, but he was the one that looked at the samples, made the descriptions and what have you. Okay, I think that covers it, and I'm about out of time anyway. Here are the references, and if there's anything that needs to be said, I'd be glad to discuss this with anybody that have an interest in this project or an interest in mineralization. You can see down here I've added at the bottom what we have come up with in our research over the years on the subject matter of alunite and uranium in Alaska and rare earth in Alaska, hopefully it will be of use to you. So on that, let me close by saying thank you.